So, welcome to our Camano Wildlife Habitat um, program. We do these once a month every Wednesday. Once a month on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. as part of our Camano Wildlife Habitat project, where we're creating an island in harmony with nature, 1 yard at a time. So we do that. This is our action step, so that we, rather than cry about all the last lost habitat, we can do something about it by things, what we do in our backyards, and those backyards connect. And it goes along with the National Wildlife Federation certified us as a community wildlife habitat, but it goes along with Douglas Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope, where he talks about a national park garden. And it's the, our national home garden national park, excuse me. And the idea is that parks in themselves are islands, and so if we all are doing things in our backyards, we're restoring corridors. So on Camano, we have 1,079 certified wildlife habitats, with the idea that we're connecting our parks and preserving habitat. And this is being done all across the nation, where people are trying to preserve habitat in their yards and connecting. So you can see in my yard, when we moved in November of 1994, there was grass in the yard and our house is down the hill. So we had all this grass at the top of the hill in our garage. And then we slowly turned it into wildlife habitat in layers. So the left there side that's in 2007, and then the right is current. So you don't do it all at once, you do it in pieces, and now it's very lush and a wonderful place to be, especially in a hot summer day. And lots of layers for the wildlife and whatever part of the spectrum they like to be at. And so to have a wildlife habitat, it's by providing food, water, shelter, and places to raise young, and also thinking about your gardening. Responsible gardening. So reducing lawn, especially on Camano, we have a single source aquifer, so it's helping get the water into pure water just going in, rather than sometimes people put chemicals on lawns and such. So this kind of helps with that. It also helps with erosion if you have the plants, especially on the slopes. Growing natives helps with water conservation, and is good for the wildlife. And then and when you are in a wildlife habitat, you don't necessarily have to be pure at first, but at some point you may think about, if I want the birds here and I'm feeding them, maybe I'll use less fertilizer and pesticides. And using the plant materials, like having a log pile that can be towards the back. We think of areas of the yard. Area 1 would be where you kind of are, where the house is, and maybe your bird feeders are, so you can recognize the birds and see them. Area 2 is the pathways that may get from your house to the garage in our case. And then area 3 is the back part that connects with other people's backyards, and that's where the corridors can go, because it's like the zone where you don't go so often. And if those Area 3 zones connect, we really do restore corridors. So that's a good place to put a log pile and some of the plant material, rather than to the dump. And then also working with other people, so that, like, we do neighborhood habitats on Camano within the community wildlife habitat. So we're linking up with yards, specifically getting our neighbors to do it as well. It's a simple way to do it. There's an application with the National Wildlife Federation. You can go online to the National Wildlife Federation, or you can find the application on our website, camanowildlifehabitat.org. All you do is check off things and know that it's a process. You don't have to have everything checked. You just need 3 things for the food source. It can be, you don't even have to put feeders up. Plants are the best way to do it. So check off 3 for that. 1 water source. It can be as simple as the bottom of a pot that you get rid of the sides, the steep sides, by putting rocks and such in. And so if you stick that out, you have a bird bath. And then the places for cover, places to raise young, and food sources, they're all pretty much the plants, and it's just what each critter is using for that. And then the sustainable gardening practices. And that's where, you may only be able to check a couple off, but as you get more into it, then you can say, okay, maybe I can do this now. Like for me, I started out the project and I had 2 cats. I let them go outside when we started the project in 2002. Now I have two new kitties who are elderly. They're 19, they'll be 19 years old in April, and they don't go outside at all. Maybe they've been out 3 or 4 times because they got out the door and then they didn't know what to do, so I could get them back in quickly. But I evolved to saying, okay, I'm going to have indoor cats. So that whole thing is the idea of what we're doing in our yard that will help wildlife, and we'll have a nice yard for ourselves as well, a little oasis. So backyard wildlife habitats with the native plants tend to be a little bit messier because you let seeds stay on the plants, and you let things grow and be a little bit more. Well, it looks less. It doesn't look manicured, and so if you add a sign, we have our own Camano Island sign as well as the National Wildlife sign. If you do that, it's showing how your yard is purposeful. Yard art helps as well. So you can see we have a lot of dots on Camano spread all throughout, with the idea that we're connecting the corridors, connecting the parks with the different dots on the island, the different backyard wildlife habitats. So this is our statement on Camano. So rather than sobbing because the logs are rolling off the island, this is something we can do, and it does make a difference when a lot of people are doing it. And you can see, not only is Camano doing it, but there are 18 communities in Washington state. So it's kind of like we are a regional wildlife habitat within the National Wildlife Federation system. So Tukwila was the first, and I found out about them. And then we started our project in July of 2002 and certified in April of 2005. We're the second in the state and the 10th in the nation. And well, there was something more. Anyway, oh, I know. So, and there are now about 180 in the nation that are certified wildlife habitats. So it's the cool action steps for communities to get people who care about the wildlife and like to garden or don't like to garden. I'm not particularly a gardener, but I hang around a lot of gardeners, so I've learned some things. And but I do like that the wildlife in my yard has a place to enjoy. So if you want to know more, the National Wildlife Federation is doing habitat stewards training. We used to do in-person training before COVID on Camano, and now since the National Wildlife Federation is doing these trainings, they basically took our format and they're doing it via Zoom. There are three opportunities to do that: April, May, or June, and it's $20, I believe, and it's a good learning for how to be a backyard wildlife habitat and how to spread the information. And then if you want to join us and help Roxy and me and our backyard wildlife project, then you just can let us know, because we gladly take some new ideas of what more to do. And so that information will also be on the website in a few days too. So it's the trainings are 4 weeks, so you can do it in April, May, or June. And the actual days are on the poster if you want to do a screenshot, and the website to apply for each session. Then more information, you can also go to the National Wildlife Federation, nwf.org, or our website. Our website is wonderful. Roxy has done such a great job. You can go and see multiple programs. We started doing Zoom during COVID, and now we do it according to whether the speaker wants to make the journey to Camano or wants to do it via Zoom. And so if the speaker is willing, we have the recordings. So our top program is how to landscape a drain field. It's quite a popular one. And you can find that, I think we have 2 of them on, because Scott did a second program, and we have that on recorded as well. And if you want some reference books, the 2 books on the top, Living with Wildlife and Landscaping for Wildlife, are by Russell Link. He is a wildlife biologist for the state. He lives on Whidbey. And so these books are nice because they're specifically Pacific Northwest. So the Landscaping for Wildlife gets into the planting, and the Living with Wildlife gets into some of the planting stuff, as well as how to live with the wildlife, and not think of them so much as nuisances, but thinking about how I can make my yard safe for them, and so that they don't become, the wildlife doesn't become a nuisance. The other book, Attracting Birds, is the National Wildlife Federation's rendition. That's a little bit more East Coast than the other two books. And then I have some things that are coming up. So our next Backyard Wildlife Program will be live at the Multi-Purpose Center, the formerly Blue Building, now Sage, that's next to CASA. And Joe Mesh is coming, and he's going to talk about birds and their nests. And if you haven't seen Joe, he's a fabulous speaker. He has so much enthusiasm. He might even have some birdhouses to sell. And so he writes a column for the Bellingham paper and is just a bird enthusiast. So the Birds and Nests will be a great program for him to come and see and to meet Joe. Then Camano 101, we'll have a booth up there. So if you want information, you want plant sheets or applications or just some tips, we'll have a booth there. And from 10 to 1, it's kind of a little event about how to live on an island with a big, well, it started originally, it was mainly just environmental groups, but you can see there's some other things going on as well. But it's basically living on an island is a little bit different. So this is a way, because of the, the septic system and our water's in the well. And so this is a opportunity to learn about that. And then Brenda will tell you more about the plant sale perhaps, but the Salal chapter of Washington Native Plant Society is having their spring sale. You can start ordering plants April 22nd at 10 a.m. Unless you're a member, then you get to go in an hour earlier. And then you pick up the plants May 2nd or 3rd, and then at the display garden that is over on the State Route 536 going between Mount Vernon and Anacortes. And then there may be some left that you can just buy if you go and haven't ordered in advance. Brenda can tell you more. And I'm going to introduce her next. So let me stop the share, and then I will introduce you to Brenda. Okay, just a second here. I got scared. I had myself there just by myself, and I thought, oh, I want to look at everybody instead. So Brenda Cunningham, she is our speaker. Like every March or April, she will be our speaker and tell us something about plants. And it gets into, people are starting to get really interested in plants, and also works with the native plant sale coming up. She is a biologist and an artist. She's worked for the National Park Service. She's also worked for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. She retired as stewardship director of the Skagit Land Trust and as a master gardener, because now she manages the Washington Native Plant Society's display garden, the Salal display garden in Mount Vernon. And she's the former chair of the Skagit chapter of the Skagit Audubon, the Salal chapter of I can't get it out, Brenda, Washington Native Plant Society, and has worked with Skagit Audubon. So she's worked with a lot of things to do with the environment, and we just love her when she comes to give another program for us. So thank you, Brenda, and sorry for that.
No worries at all, Val. Yeah, no worries at all. So I did have, when you mentioned the birdhouses with Joe coming, I did have one little fun story to tell you. Is this week I saw chestnut-backed chickadee looking in a birdhouse that I have that's visible from my kitchen table, and I thought, oh, maybe I should clean that out. I forgot if I cleaned that out or not. So I went over to look at it after the chickadee was just looking in it, and I opened up the bottom, and then I could hear some buzzing, and I was like, oh shoot, there's a bee using it, and this a bit of the material from past years of chickadees using the box fell out, along with this globule of kind of waxy stuff that was probably about the size of a cherry. Anyway, I closed the box back up. I saw a bumblebee come out. I think it was Melapigus. And anyway, I put the globule back in, and I asked Bob Gillespie, a person who has given programs to you guys as well, what this globule could have been. And he thought it was, and he showed me a picture of one. It's something that the bumblebee gathers and makes its food for the larva. So I think this bumblebee was nesting in the birdhouse, which I've had happen before. And I just wanted to put that out there, that it's not, be careful as you're cleaning birdhouses, or it's not always important to clean the birdhouses. So anyway, I'm happy to report that the buzzing continues inside. I
Oh,
can hear
good.
it from outside. So I didn't disturb her so much that she left, but
Oh,
I
good.
probably pissed her off. So she is busy rearranging whatever she was doing there and hopefully laying some eggs that will hatch into more bumblebees. But
Oh, cool.
so yeah, I will assume I should share my screen now. Let me know when everybody can see that okay.
It's good, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. So I am going to talk about rare plants, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk just to give you an introduction to the Washington Native Plant Society, just because there's so many resources available on their website, and you don't have to be a member to use those resources. So I just want to make sure people are aware of the organization and how much they can get from it. Um, it's a statewide organization, and then there are 12 separate chapters, and each chapter acts somewhat independently. We have our own boards and we have our own activities that we specialize in, but we are affiliated with the state organization. So sometimes it's confusing to people. They want to join Salal, but what you do is you join WNPS and you affiliate with Salal as a chapter. The Salal chapter covers our service area is Island, Skagit, and the northern part of Snohomish County. So um, we do have field trips and programs that cover Island County in particular. The mission of the Native Plant Society is all about conserving and appreciating our incredible diversity of native plants, including rare ones in Washington state. And this is just a screenshot of the homepage, and you can see that there's lots of tabs here with information about native plants, and I encourage you to explore that. There is one tab in particular that's about gardening with natives, and it's got a lot of links in it for you to explore with information about kind of garden worthy native plants or ones that would finding how do you find ones that will work well in your yard or for whatever purpose you're trying to find. And then lastly about that web page, I was just looking at this. This is a under one of those tabs that says plant lists. And one of the things the Native Plant Society does is it goes out to on field trips, they go out to public lands, and we make the lists of what species of plants are found on those properties. And this is a clickable map where you could click on Island County, and it would give you a list of what places in Island County there are lists, plant lists for. And I just glanced at that, and of course, there's Kama Beach, Camano Island State Park, Iverson Spit, places like that. And as the Native Plant Society takes more field trips out there, they'll update, revise those lists. I find it kind of fun if I'm planning a road trip across the state. It's always fun to just like click on county that you're going to be driving through and see where there are some public lands that you might want to stop at and take a walk and look at some different plants. You can also search these lists by a species of plant. Like if you saw a plant or heard about a plant, maybe even on this in this talk or at some talk, and you want to find where can I see that in the wild? Well, you can search the plant lists for that species. Also, Native Plant Society members get the journal, which is distributed to everybody in the state who's a Native Plant Society member. And then you also get a local chapter newsletter. Our Salal chapter newsletter is called Potent Teller. We have punsters in the group. And it has articles ranging from field trips, spotlights on volunteers, and maybe what's happening in the garden or what's coming up in the way of uh, plant workshops and so on. And you get invitations, of course, to our field trips. These are just some pictures of some of the activities that Native Plant Society members have. The group in the middle, those are members of a stewardship class. And on the left are some members working in our nursery at the garden. So I just wanted to spend those 5 minutes on the Native Plant Society because think it's a great resource, and I hope that people will take advantage of it. As I say, you don't have to be a member to get much of the benefit from it. So please check that out. But what I'm most excited about is to talk to you about this rare plant program that I discovered about 20 years ago or so. Its formal name is Rare Plant Care and Conservation, but that's a mouthful. So everybody just calls it Rare Care. And it was founded in 1998. It's modeled after a program that was started in another state. I want to say Vermont, but I'm not quite positive about that. Um, its main purpose is to help public agencies that are probably short on staff, short on time, um, short on resources. We help them monitor the rare plants on their public property. So we're not going onto private property. We're not going onto tribal land. It's all either federal or state owned properties. And land managers have generally asked the program to send somebody out to monitor plant species. So um, I'll get into specifics of how many plant species we have that are rare in just a moment. But um, first, how do we determine that something is rare? It can be any number of different factors that contribute to it being rare. This evening primrose that's on the left, that's a case where the species is found in a number of northwestern states, but in Washington there are only 7 populations of it. So more than 7 plants, but say there might be 50 plants in one place, and a couple miles away, maybe another 20 plants, and so 7 locations like that only in Washington state. So it's considered very vulnerable because something could happen to 2 or 3 of those places, and we could lose the species. Other plants like the Phacelia, that in the middle, that's just an oddball. It's a disjunct population. The nearest other example of that same species is in Nevada. And so it's a mystery. How did it end up being in Washington state? There's not a lot of them, but still, how are they there? And the same species is also in Nevada. So that's an oddball and considered rare. And then a separate example is the desert parsley on the right. It's endemic to Washington state. So not all endemics are rare, but by endemic, I mean it's only found in Washington state. So in this case, we're talking about endemism of Washington. So the only place this plant is found is Washington state in the world. But I think they say there are about 80 species of plants in Washington state that are endemic, but only 36 of those are considered rare. So just because it's endemic doesn't mean it's going to be rare. There could be many of a plant. And thinking of endemism, Dr. Krugerberg, who is a famous botanist, he's passed away now, but he made this sketch many years ago of endemism. And what he's trying to illustrate here, this is just like back of the envelope kind of sketching, is that there's a high number of endemics on the Olympic Peninsula. And then he noticed the dark objects are highest amount of endemism. These are in the middle of the state are the Wenatchee Mountains. I'm not sure which range this is to the right, but I know the Wenatchees have a lot of endemics, in part because it's got a really different soil type. So the underlying geology can really influence how many endemics we have in an area. But I think the point of this map is that there aren't endemics everywhere in the state. They're very focused in the Cascades, in the Olympics, and then, of course, some along the Puget Sound, and then down on the Columbia River. We also have a lot of endemics. And just as an example of an endemic that's not rare, this is Tweedy's Lewisia, which is I wouldn't say it's popular because if you're a native plant nerd, it's a popular plant if you could grow it. This one is a woman that lives in the Stanwood area had this plant. It naturally occurs in eastern Washington, and it really likes it drier, not so wet. It tends to rot out when we try to grow it here, but she grew it in a pot for a number of years. And it's an endemic. It's only found in Washington state, but there's lots of it. So it's not considered rare. Just to show you, this is another um, resource that I recommend if you are into searching about plants and understanding where they are, the Burke Herbarium Image Collection. If you just put that into your search engine, Burke Herbarium Image Collection generally comes right up. It's a repository of photographs. This map here on the left, the highlighted counties indicate what counties that plant occurs in, and the green dots are pictures of herbarium specimens. So if this were a live image rather than a screenshot, I could click on this green dot and it would come up with a picture of the plant on a herbarium sheet, and there would be information about where that plant was collected. So it can be a really cool resource for learning about the plant. Scientists can, students can study the geography or the biogeography of these plants, and then the red squares are photographs. And if I were to scroll down on this page, I'd see many more photographs of this really beautiful plant. But here at the endemism, the only place this plant occurs in the world is here, and it's very focused on the Wenatchees, or Eastern Washington, just over the crest. So um, here's a list of some of the traits that can cause rarity. Some of them have to do with the biogeography of the plant or the morphology. They may not be that good at dispersing their seeds. Um, they may be victims of a changing environment, whether it's early climatic changes or anthropomorphic ones. Um, there are many different reasons that plants can become rare. Some of them don't have good viability or germination rates with their seeds, kind of like some mammals that are rare. We have some mammals that just don't reproduce very frequently, and consequently, they can become rare. I think a lot of the ones that I have monitored are what I would call paleo endemics. That is, they once ranged over a much larger area, but because of changes, um, climatic changes, well, as I say, pre-human as well as glacial and anthropomorphic changes, they've become much more isolated and are have much smaller ranges. And I'll show you some pictures of those. One example is this Carex magellanica, which I started monitoring this maybe 15 years ago or so. Some of the sedges, Carex are sedges, are really hard to identify, but Carex magellanica is super easy to identify. So it was a good sedge for me to cut my teeth on. I wasn't gonna fail in identifying it correctly because it's a very, very distinct sedge. I will have to say that now, in putting this slide program together, I discovered that it's no longer considered rare. So maybe I found so many of them, it's not rare anymore. But what intrigued me about the plant is the name. Its common name is something like poor sedge or boreal sedge, but Magellanica, the scientific name, intrigued me because, of course, Straits of Magellan, what does that have to do with a plant up here in northern North America? Well, this is a subspecies that we have here. I think it's irigua, might be the way it's pronounced. So Carex magellanica irigua. But there's another Carex magellanica, a different subspecies that's found in very southern South America. So the Magellanic Straits area. So I just am intrigued by the idea of how did the same species end up in two such distant places? How old is this species? Is it was it carried, or was it just had a much more extensive range at one time? Does it have to do with, movement, plate tectonics, and the movement of plants around, or just that kind of magical relationship between plants at such distant areas. Here's a map from that Burke Herbarium website, again showing its range. So the little green dots, these are just herbarium specimens. And I would say it probably occurs all across this northern tier. It's just nobody has made herbarium specimens of the plant at every location. Another example of a paleo-endemic would be, or it's not, not just endemic to Washington State, but is this Alaska harebell, Campanula lasiocarpa. It's a beautiful little short plant. It's like our bluebells that people like to grow in their gardens, but it's only a couple inches tall, but the flower is robust. You can see the plant itself is quite small, but it has this great big outrageous flower on it. Well, back in 2006, there was a population on a mountain in the Cascades that was found. The population started at about 6,000 feet and went higher. And that was in '06. And in 2009, I went up that same trail and was not able to find it until I got up to 6,700 feet. So in 3 years, it seems like it had gone up in elevation 700 feet. And then what I did find was that even at that point, the mountain was only 7,200 feet high. So I kind of worried that it didn't have much time left. And sure enough, that year it did not produce seed. This is the flower all shriveled up without having been fertilized. And more recently, probably in the 2018, 19, maybe even a little bit later, somebody went up and tried to find it and it was gone completely. So I think it's an example of a species that is marching upward in elevation and then winking out as it goes up off the mountaintop. Now that's just in Washington State. I do want to point out here is yet another range map. So its common name is Alaska harebell. And I kind of figured it was common in more northern climates. And sure enough, it's quite common, I think, in Alaska and Canada. And it is still found in parts of Washington. It's just gradually making its way north and higher in elevation. We probably won't see it for too much longer in Washington State, but it is probably holding on just fine in these other places. This is a very coarse map, of course. It doesn't really give you much information about specifically what kind of habitat it's found in. But these are the plants that I like to go monitor because they evoke an earlier time, maybe a earlier time with a colder climate, closer to when we had glaciers in the area. Um, this is again the Burke Herbarium website you can look at. And when a plant is rare, they don't want to give such specific information. So they just give you these kind of vague squares. These are photographs. This is an herbarium specimen was collected there, but very few places. And if you clicked on that, you wouldn't get much information. You might see a picture of the herbarium specimen, but you wouldn't be able to see where it was collected because they don't want people out there disturbing these already rare species. This just illustrates the main causes of more recent concerns. Habitat destruction, of course, whether it be things like wildfire and flooding, landslips, but also cattle grazing or people destroying the habitat for one reason or another has caused probably most of the reduction in the plant populations. But also non-native plant species encroaching on these can be a threat as well. Just to give you an idea of how many species we're talking about, so the Washington State has, I saw two different figures today, but approximately 3,100 vascular plant species. So 3,100 different species of plants. And about 380, some of those are considered rare. So that turns out to be, it's not quite 15%. I think it's about 12% are considered rare of our native species of Washington state. And rare could be endangered, threatened, sensitive, could be ones where they're not listed at all yet, but they're of concern. That adds up to 380 some. And then, but at the federal level, we only have 9 listed species, 3 endangered and 6 threatened. And the significance of that is not that we don't have that many species that are about to wink out, but rather that our state does not have an Endangered Species Act. Just the federal government does. So it's only through the Federal Endangered Species Act that we have legal recourse or protection for these plants. So the only plants that are thoroughly protected in Washington state are those that are listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act. The others are vulnerable to whatever landowners want to do. The good news is that we have a lot of good public lands in Washington state, whether it's federal or state owned, and that's why we do all this monitoring on federal and state lands, because the land managers there want to protect these species and they want to know what species they have and what their status is before they make land management decisions. Some of the other work that the Rare Care Program does includes ex situ conservation, which in this case is just a fancy way of saying seed bank. So they send out the same groups of volunteers. If you become a Rare Care volunteer, you can sign up to be a seed collector as well. And there are very strict protocols under which you can collect seeds. If there aren't enough plants, of course, you don't collect seeds at all. But if there are enough to sustain a collection, you do that, you turn it in. There's a group of volunteers that work in Seattle to clean the seeds, make sure there aren't little critters in there eating the seeds, and then they put them into controlled temperature and humidity conditions, basically a freezer that's very precise and regulated. And it's kind of a seed bank for the future. And occasionally they take some seeds out and test them for germination rates. If we need to collect more, we can do that if the plant still exists. They can also use the seeds for propagating and doing some reintroductions if appropriate. But what I like to do, since I don't live in Seattle and can't spend my time in the seed bank sorting through seeds, I contribute in the way of monitoring. So this map shows scattering of the dots. Those are all known locations of rare plants. So if I said there were 380 some, I think it's like 386 rare plants in Washington state, there may be some plants only have one occurrence in the state, but others might have 20 occurrences in the state. So there are something like, 3,000 or so occurrences of rare plants throughout the state. And the volunteers are asked to go out and visit some of those each year. So once you're vetted as a volunteer and trained, you get access to a list, and a board decides what species are the best ones for them to be monitoring this year. So it's not like they don't put all 3,000 up every year. It's more like they put several hundred species and locations up, and you pick and choose. Some of them are based on land managers saying, no one's gone out for 10 years to look at this plant. Could you send someone out? Or we've got a road construction going on and I'm concerned about this species or this population. Could you check on its status? And then in other cases, this board that advises the plant program, they may decide that they want one particular species, every occurrence of it, to be monitored over the course of a 2 or 3 year period so they can get a really good snapshot of what the condition of that plant is across the whole state. So there may be 3 or 4 species on the list that you keep seeing for a couple years in a row, and you go, that's interesting. That must be what they're calling a focal species. Like they want to know what's the situation with Potentia nivea across the whole state. And so they'll send people out repeatedly to try to cover every single occurrence of that species. I hope I'm making sense there. But um, it's basically you apply to be a volunteer, and they give you a 1 day training. There are trainings in Eastern Washington, Southern, and Western Washington. I had to go down to Seattle for my training, and explaining to you, basically what it is you're looking for. You don't have to be a technical botanist by any means. You can pick some of the easy species that are very easy to distinguish from other species, and you just kind of work your way up. And you do have to know how to use a plant key, but in general, it's easy for anybody to get into if they're interested. So some of the specific species that I had a lot of fun monitoring over the many years include Gentiana glauca. That's it doesn't really have a better common name, unfortunately. It's Glaucus gentian. So you may be familiar with gentians that you see on seeps and stream courses in the mountains that are very blue and robust. Gentiana glauca, is very pale, as its name implies, and it's not nearly as big or robust, but it has a really interesting life history. So this is the plant. It's probably just 2, 3 inches tall at the most. And what I find interesting is it occurs not exclusively, but most often on top of what they call earth hummocks. So this is a landscape in northern Washington, somewhere in Okanagan County. I can't give you anything more specific, but it's these earth hummocks. There's not rocks below them. There's this like landscape of bumpy meadow, just surrounded by forest, and these bumps are actually entirely made of peat and moss. And I'm not quite sure. Maybe somebody in the group knows. We can talk at the end here. Knows something more about how these are formed, but they're found across the northern hemisphere. You can find them in Iceland, in the Scandinavian countries, Canada, I think in the northern Rockies as well. I suspect there's something to do with permafrost and the melting of the soil and some reaction that occurred that they've kind of bubbled up with these mossy clumps that are basically made of peat. And you could be walking through a meadow in the northern part of Okanagan and not see these, and then you come to the next meadow and there are some. It's not that predictable where they are, but this gentian tends to grow at the very top of these little hummocks, and the hummocks are all about the same size. But what intrigued me is I went back to this place. I've been to this particular meadow 3 or 4 times. There's not very many gentians in this one. And I went back with some friends who were visiting, and we just wanted to go for a multi-day hike. So we were out for 3 or 4 days, and we walked past this meadow. And I wanted to check it out again because it has burned since I last went. So this picture is pre-burn, and you can see there's forest around the perimeter of this. And every time I've gone to this meadow to get to it, I've always walked on the edge between the forest and the meadow because the meadow is wet, hummocky, the forest is all full of brush. So I wouldn't walk through that. Well, now, because of the burn, I discovered the the forest has hummocks in it as well that I would never have seen except for this burn. So these hummocks again are made of peat. In some cases, I found some that had burned halfway through, and I could clearly see there's no rock. They're just made of plant material, and they must predate the forest. This is in a pretty dry Okanagan area. I think the forest is probably, these trees look small, but we are Western Washingtons. In Eastern Washington, these might be 80 years old or even 100 years old. So this is the hummocks predate that by far. And I think what's happening is there were hummocks everywhere, and the forest is encroaching on that meadow. And the brush, which had been huckleberry, spirea, that kind of stuff, was totally covering up the hummocks, and I had no idea they were there. So just kind of fun exploration of Washington geography is fascinating to me. Another thing I do when I'm preparing for going out to look at look for a rare plant is I love to study maps and aerial pictures. This is kind of an old aerial picture, but this is probably one of these in the foothills of the Cascades. So just east of I-5, there are these folds in the landscape and depressional wetlands in the forests. And this is probably a Forest Service road, possibly a trail. It's big enough. I think it must be a road. But I'd be given information from the program, the rare care program, that the plant was around one of these wetlands. They might have said, oh, it's around this one. And so I would study the map and figure out how am I going to get there. Um, I will use it, put a GPS point here, and then I'll just walk or drive this road until I'm as close as I can get to there, and then start walking through the forest to get to it. But then this aerial photo also tells me I should be looking at some of these other wetlands just in case the plant occurs there as well. So we're always trying to be more thorough, add more information to what we already know about the plant. The landscape on the ground, in this case, there are a lot of um, little open areas. They're the big kind of pondish things, but then there are these little open areas as well. And when you get into them, after you've walked through the forest a little ways, you feel like no one else has ever been there. And of course, someone has. They reported a rare plant. But for some reason, to me, it always feels like, wow, I'm the first person to ever go to this place. It feels so wild and prehistoric. So there's rarely any sign of human activity, no trails, no fishermen's trails or anything like that. These are not that remote, but just not attractive for other people to go to them. So um, I found some rare sedge along the meadow here. We're also asked to document threats that we see to the plants. So there I'm in my yellow shirt again off to the right, looking at this rare plant. And obviously, there's a real threat of ORV use right next to the meadow or the where this plant is found. So it's not our job to police that, but we just document it, take pictures, write up a description and share that with the land manager, and then the manager can decide if there's something that they need to do about that. And the threats could be anything from cattle grazing to a trail goes right through the population, a foot trail, or um, you might notice a lot of insect damage on a plant, or mountain goat has been eating it, stuff like that. Another little story to tell is, and again, I mentioned the Wenatchees have a lot of endemic plants. It's because they have unique geology in Washington with serpentine soils. This is a plant called Thompson's connectus, and it's a sweet little plant that grows in these serpentine soils in the Wenatchee Mountains, and it wasn't hard to find. It had a pretty good description, not GPS. I have a lot of sites I've gone to that are the original description does not include any GPS information, but there'll be some description about its location relative to a trail or to a peak. And so there's kind of this treasure hunt of trying to figure out what did that person mean when they said it was 1 mile northeast of the peak. And so you have to kind of hunt and peck around, but you begin to know what to expect in terms of what habitat some of these plants like. And so we found this cactus pretty readily. And there was quite a bit of it. So we were trying to document it thoroughly. And again, here's a map from the Burke Herbarium site showing it's a very limited distribution of this plant right in the middle of the state. And then when we were watching it or noting it, I kept seeing this fritillary um, nectaring on the plant. And what I liked about the fritillary is so bright and colorful. That was easy to spot. Plant, I don't know if you can see, it's white against a light colored rock. The foliage is gray green. There's a lot of other gray green foliage in this landscape. So the plant itself is not, it is distinct if you know what you're looking for, but it was a whole lot easier to find this fritillary than it was to find the plant. So we did our survey, marked out the perimeter, counted the number of plants we saw. I mean, literally, we're looking at things like fewer than 100 plants we count, and then we're headed down the trail, and a fritillary flies across the trail again, and it makes us think, oh, maybe there's some cactus around here too. And sure enough, you follow the fritillary, and there's another population of it that wasn't known before. So it's kind of fun to get to know a plant so intimately that you can actually do something like that, is to follow a butterfly to find a new population. uh, my husband must have taken this picture, and we like to joke about it, that it shows how focused I am on my plants and not on the scenery around me. So this was in the Olympics, very early in the season, like early July, and nobody else was around. The plant we were looking for was quite small, but it was found on this bare, um, I should say, snow-free slope. the we did have to cross maybe a little bit of snow to get there, but you can see I'm in short sleeves and I was quite comfortable. The plant is quite small. This is again another sedge, and it's a sedge that's pretty easy to identify once you know what you're looking for, but it is quite small. It's only found in the Olympics, I believe, and it's quite numerous in the Olympics. So I was using a quadrat to estimate the population because there's so many. This is an example of, there's a trick, another Wendy, I think it was Wendy Gibble taught me, is to take those sticky post-it notes that you can get for marking pages in your books. They usually have a very colorful end on them, but a clearish uh, tail that's sticky. And for sedges in particular, it's great that you can poke the plant with it and get some plant parts off and actually look at them with a lens or a loupe or even your naked eye without having all the parts blow away. So if you just had the parts in your hand, in the palm of your hand, the wind could easily take these and blow them away. And here is an example of something that you need to be able to look at to identify the sedge, is that this is the style, and it's called a persistent style, and it comes from the base of the plant. So this is going to be the seed of the sedge, but this is quite unique, that you don't normally see a style coming off from the side here and have it persist and stick to the plant for that long. So what I did was I did my little post-it sticky thing, and I put it down and I took a picture of it, and then I can send that to Rare Care and say, see, this is the plant that you were looking for. Proof positive. Just another example of me looking for really tiny plants, but I love to be up in this landscape, so I don't mind having to look down at the ground and stopping once in a while to look up. And the plant I was looking for here was another sedge. I'm not a sedge expert by any means, but I'll take the ones that are pretty easy to identify. And this one is Carex capitata. And the distinctive thing about it is that there's only one head, and each of these, um, the style just has uh, the pistil has two styles, a bifurcated style. So other sedges that look like this might have three instead of two. So that's the kind of stuff you gotta look at. But not impossible to do once you know what you're looking for. And I was really excited about this one because I think this plant, nobody had looked for it in 50 years, and it was like a record from the 70s. And it wasn't because it wasn't there, it's just nobody had bothered to look for it. So they didn't have very specific information, but it was pretty easy to find once we spotted it. And this is just a picture of Wendy Gibble. She's the director of the program. Uh, she had plans to go up to Alpine Lakes Wilderness, and her partner that she'd recruited to help her with a seed collecting foray backed out with had family emergency or something. So she called up Tim and I and said, "Would you guys come with me to the enchantments for 5 days?" I was like, "Heck yeah, sign me up. I'm in." So we went up to the enchantments for 5 days. And I think Tim was falling asleep during most of this because we were spending all our time trying to make sure we were identifying this carex, this sedge, correctly. Wendy is a professional botanist. I would never try this one on my own because it's a very difficult to identify sedge. But she would read the book and I would take measurements. And then we would swap places where she would take measurements and I would read the book and we would try to come up with the same result in hopes that we were looking at the correct plant. And she made these seed collections of this rare plant. Again, the enchantments are kind of an unusual geography. They stick up higher than anything around them and have some unique plants as a result. And fantastic scenery. So we weren't alone up there, that's for sure. It's a popular place to go. But if you are a hiker, you may know that it takes there's a lottery system to get into the enchantments. So I was never thinking I would get in there, but I was very pleased to go with Wendy and try to find some of these plants. And then this last summer, um, we were in the Olympics and monitoring a plant that is endangered in Washington state called Veronica schizantha. I just like the name. Its common name is even fun. It's fringed kitten tails. And unlike those little itty bitty tiny sedges, this one is more like leaves that are 4 inches across and very easy to find. It's just that it's one of these Olympic rarities. It's just not found many places, and but it's easy enough to spot. Here's a map from that USDA site that shows that it's only found in Oregon and Washington. And then if you look at the Burke site, you can see in Washington state, it's only found in this one or two places in Grays Harbor County and then down here in Lewis County. So very, very rare. And it is listed as state endangered in Washington. So that was a privilege I don't get to look at very many state endangered species, and then to have one that was so pretty and easy to identify was a treat. Just to finish up talking about Rare Care and the other programs it does, I wanted to mention they do these projects where they're researching what rare plants need and then doing some outplanting with seeds they've collected. These yellow stars are for one locations for a species of Sidalcia, which is a very beautiful, I think of it as a native version of a hollyhock. It's kind of a pink, tall flower. So it naturally occurs in these three places, but it was diminishing. They could tell the meadows were changing enough that the plant was not going to survive there very long. So they started collecting seed, growing the plants, and now they've been planting them out at these other locations and what they're calling assisted migration. They did a GIS experiment or analysis where they figured out the habitat requirements needed by the Sidalcia are now occurring at these other pink places. So they're planting these small plugs out at these locations, and they'll see in the next few years if that was a successful way to preserve this species by planting it out at new locations where it hasn't been before. Kind of bold stuff to try. So just wrapping this up, I hope, you guys learned something about the Rare Care Program and are intrigued by it. It certainly could use your support. It does have support from state and federal agencies right now, but of course, we know that that's very, very uncertain times for them at this point. If you're interested in volunteering for them, you can sign up through their website. Of course, do all that you can to protect our native species, whether they're rare or not. And as backyard habitat people, of course, you're already doing that, and support your local conservation organizations. If an issue comes up regarding plant conservation, uh, use this information to call your legislators and advocate for them. Here's a list of the different organizations that have helped pay for rare care over the years. The Washington Natural Heritage Program is the repository for rare plant information that's housed by the Department of Natural Resources. Um, and then I think this might be the last slide. Roxy was going to put these links into the chat at some point or on the website, one or the other. But the first one is this online field guide of rare plants. So when I get a rare plant assignment, I go to that field guide and it gives me information about how to identify it, how to distinguish it from some other plant that might look similar. And then the website for the whole program is this one at the Botanic Gardens at the UW. So I think, yeah, that was it. So people have any questions? I talked too fast.
No, that was great. That was great, Brenda. So what are the volunteer opportunities with Salal Native Plant Society now? I know that you have work parties and all sorts of fun things.
Yeah, well, we've really expanded a lot of our activities. We've been lately having work parties. I manage the nursery primarily and do propagation of native plants. We had some workshops to do hardwood cuttings, and then we've been potting up plugs and planting seeds and transplanting seedlings into pots to get ready for sale and such. But and then managing and maintaining the garden. But I'm quite excited that we've had a new volunteer step up who has a lot of experience with outreach and interpretation, and we've ramped up our outreach activities quite a bit. So we're participating in far more uh, festivities like um, rainscaping or storming the sound, or we were in Illuminite, which was fun. So we're doing a lot more activities where we're tabling at events, and we could certainly use help with tabling, where all you're doing is greeting people and asking them, if they're interested in native plants and sharing information with them. We've tried to expand. I've been interested in doing more artwork associated with native plants, and so we made luminaries. There's this thing behind me. I think I might have. Yeah. Well, anyway, we had a lot of. They're too hard to show on Zoom, but so we made luminaries using native plant themes because I've been making luminaries with at Tri-D every year, but have always made like a hummingbird or a dragonfly or a bird of some kind. And I said I want to do more plants, and so last year I did Douglas fir cone, and that inspired me to teach a class where we made a bunch of cones, and then we had them on display with uh, fawn lilies and gentians and a bunch of different plant themed um, luminaries. We put them on display in the um, running store in Mount Vernon. And now some of those are on display in the Marysville Library. And starting in April, they'll be on display in the Burlington Library in up here in Skagit County. But so volunteering to help with, if you're interested in art, we're talking about some learning how to do seaweed pressings, or dried seaweed as an artistic display. If that's of interest to you, um, we also adopted a bit of trail at Deception Pass State Park, the Pass Lake Trail. Our chapter adopted that. And so once a month we go out and do um, no heavy trail work, but like clipping back things to make sure the trail stays open and removing invasive species. And at the same time, of course, we appreciate the native species that are there. So we are, creating a list of what species are there, but also trying to. There's an old house site on that trail that has a lot of vinca and species that need to be cut back and removed if we can from that. So we're trying to do some stewardship work as well. I'm sure there are other things that I'm not thinking of, but a lot happening in our chapter right now.
Very, very exciting. So, does anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask verbally? You're welcome to unmute. You can also type questions in the chat. How much is training is required for rear care?
It's just one day.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I didn't know if it
yeah,
was a 6 week program or not.
no, no, no.
Okay.
It's just one day. I mean, mostly it's you kind of learn as you go and you learn from others. You can go out with somebody else too. You can request a partner so that you're not out there doing it by yourself. I never go by myself. Tim always goes with me and he's never taken the training. So um but he knows what to look for. I give him a picture and say, look for this. Yeah. So we have fun. We call it hiking with a purpose.
Sure.
Yeah. But
Um,
we've done some roadside ones too, where you just using binoculars to look across a creek or even just literally plants right there on the shoulder of the road that are rare.
So you don't have to, not all of them are 3 day hikes.
No, not at all. It's getting harder to find ones that are long hikes, actually. I would say most of them are not hikes right now.
Oh, really? Cool. Bonnie, you had a question?
well, so my niece in Oregon sent me some golden paintbrush
Mhm.
uh, seeds, which hopefully I've planted. Are they significant? Should I just like hopefully they propagate, and if I have seeds, do I send them somewhere or just keep throwing them
Um,
onto my 2.5 acres?
just keep propagating them where they are. The golden paintbrush is interesting. So in Island County at Pacific Rim Institute on Whidbey Island, they've successfully figured out how to propagate golden paintbrush as has someplace in Oregon apparently. And so that's a rare species and it is still listed. Um, so so our Native Plant Society, Washington Native Plant Society has a policy where we can't sell rare species. I got caught one time when I did start to try to sell some Barrett's penstemon because Fourth Corner Nursery was producing it. And somebody called me on it and said, "Oh, you can't do that as a native plant society." So I can't, but personally, uh, Pacific Rim Institute has permission from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to go ahead and sell golden paintbrush. So here's a perk volunteering for Native Plant Society. I bought a whole bunch and have been giving one to each of the volunteers who comes and helps at the plant sale. So people have been getting them as gifts. I can't sell them, but I can give them away to people. They do require a host plant, so they're a hemiparasite. They or saprophytic, they need to take some nutrients from a host plant. So the host plants I know of at Pacific Rim Institute that have been successful are yarrow, um, Oregon sunshine, which is Areophilum linatum, and
Okay.
then a potentia, I think gracilis might be. So like what's a common name for that? Cinquefoil. Um, but if you have yarrow in your yard, which most people do,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I would plant it actually, like physically with the yarrow. If
Okay.
you've got seeds, that's great. Just sprinkle the seeds on top of your area where your yarrow is, and it'll naturally find its way to glom onto the roots of the yarrow. So um, but they do require good drainage, sunlight.
Sunlight. Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
cool plant.
Yeah.
And Yeah.
Beautiful. Other questions? Well, this has been really fun, Brenda. Fun stories.
Wait,
Well,
Carl has
thanks.
a question that he put into the chat.
Oh, okay.
What concerns or issues for rare plants due to climate change?
Well, like to me, that campanula going off the top of the mountain was eye-opening for me. Back in 2009, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to last very much longer. So just running out of habitat because they're climbing up in elevation and our mountains only go so high. So we will lose some species that way. I think we'll also see um, some species that can't tolerate super wet winters, and we're having heavier rain events. Um, some species may require, a colder period for their seeds to get stratified. Um, so I think some of those things are gonna change what species we have here in Washington State, and maybe the movement of forests, forests migrating into meadows um, over time because they're able to. That may cause and fire. We're going to see more fires, I'm sure, and in some cases that changes the landscape enough, either makes it unstable. You have landslip. There was one plant that I was looking for in the Olympics, very rare shooting star, only found in a couple places in the Olympics, maybe even at all. And there was a landslip in the place where it was supposed to be. All I could do was stand there, look like my GPS is telling me it's supposed to be here, and it's just rock rubble where there had been a cliff before, but that wasn't climate change. That was just unstable slopes. But I think, yeah, climate change is definitely impacting the number of species that are going to be extirpated in Washington state. Maybe others will come in from the south. I don't know.
Did you find find that gentian after the fire, or was it the wrong time of year to find the plant? When you
No, it was gone. Yeah,
oh,
yeah. But it was a very small population to begin with, and I know there's much larger populations to the west of where that is. So it was sad, but at the same time, it was like, oh, that was a needle in a haystack there. Literally there were, hundreds of mounds, and 8 years ago we found one
oh,
plant. Yeah.
okay.
So, but I know it occurs both east and west of there actually. So it was, yeah. Maybe it'll come back in a few years if there's, seed source somewhere that I don't know of, or I can't search everywhere. So
Well,
yeah,
all right, very nice. Well, thank you for doing all that work. That's really fun that
it's
you
fun.
do it and then that you can tell us about it and we can experience it vicariously. We've got another comment. Thank you. Great to participate. I'll spread the word for the next one.
Yeah, yeah. And those golden paintbrush are great. I just wouldn't, I mean, you can give away the seeds to other people if you end up having seeds. But just be fine to just make a little population. Pollinators do better if they have a big mass of the same species of flowers to visit. So having many golden paintbrush in one place is best.
So not you won't be planting them in the Salal garden?
We have rabbits there. There's no
Oh,
chance for a paintbrush to survive there, unfortunately. So I have one in my yard,
okay, cool.
and we have successfully grown the red paintbrush
Oh, cool.
from seed. So we have a bunch of those. I don't know that I would put them in our native garden unless I can really rabbit proof it. But
The garden there is really wonderful. If you're looking for examples of native plants, mature native specimens, a lot of times you see them in a nursery and you don't know how big they're going to get or what they look like. So the garden is
yeah,
a really wonderful place to.
Plus
yeah,
that you have it in different types of, like you even have an alpine area.
yeah.
You have, I can't, I'm not thinking of my You know, the
Yeah, we've
section.
got some mountain hemlock with spirea, the mountain spirea around it. And we've learned to propagate the subalpine spirea pretty well. So we're excited about that we can do that from hardwood cuttings. And yeah. So we have a kind of a grassland area or sunny bald and um, pond, and of course mixed hedgerows and all kinds of different habitats. But it is, as Roxy says, it's about 27 years old. So it's a good place to come and see what that birch tree is going to look like when it reaches maturity.
So Brenda's given us a number of great plant programs that you can find on our YouTube channel. So if you were looking for specific things about native plants, go check those out. And tell us about your plant sale. When will the online catalog be populated?
I think the very first week in April, we'll put out an email that has a link, and we'll put it on our website too, a link to the store where you can browse but can't buy, just so you can plan, you can read. We have all the information about what the cultural requirements are for those species, so you can read about them, make your plans, think about whether you want to buy that plant or not, and strategize how you're going to do the day of the sale. And then on April 22nd, again, for the general public, it opens at 10. But if you are a Salal chapter member, we will give you a password to get into the store at 9 o'clock. Last year, that was helpful in kind of spreading out some of the sales, and it gives a reward to the Salal chapter members for supporting us through everything. Um, and they didn't buy everything. It wasn't a total bust for people that came in at 10 o'clock. So not to fear, we probably had at least half the number of plants still available at 10 o'clock. And then, as Val pointed out, we do have plants we hold some plants back. Like, say we have 36 of a particular species, we maybe put 30 into the sale, and then we have 6 that we sell at the in-person part of the sale. That way, people who are buying online, we make sure that they get the best ones. And then if you come in person, the plants might be just fine. But at the time that we were filling the order, we might have felt this wasn't the best plant. So you can decide in person. And sometimes we knock some prices off too. So we just want to get plants in the ground. They don't do any good sitting in our nursery.
Yep. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions? All righty. Well, see you next
Thanks, you guys.
I hope.
Thank you.
Yes, you will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.